who's actually going to get the most out of a 15,000-pound two-post floor plate auto lift, and who would be better off putting their money into a more modest jack? Is the price justified for someone who just wants to change a tire once a month, or does it make sense for a garage that lives and breathes heavy-duty repairs? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Those are the questions that keep most buyers up at night when they stare at a big metal platform that promises to hoist trucks, SUVs, and even small trailers with almost no fuss. When I first started looking into floor plate lifts, I kept coming back to the same concerns: space, ceiling height, and the learning curve of actually operating a two-post system. Most home-based hobbyists have a garage ceiling that sits somewhere around 8 feet, and the NT16's overall height of 120 inches can feel like a ceiling smasher if you're not careful. On the other hand, the 72-inch lifting height means you can get a full-size pickup clear of the ground without having to crawl underneath or use a scissor jack that barely lifts the front end. I also thought about the kind of vehicles you'd realistically be raising. A 16,000-pound capacity sounds impressive, but if you're only ever lifting a 3,500-pound sedan, you're paying for a lot of unused muscle. That's the trade-off that trips people up. You either end up with a massive piece of equipment you barely use, or you underinvest and end up straining a smaller lift beyond its limits. So, who should actually consider the Triumph NT16? If you run a small commercial shop that sees a steady stream of trucks, vans, and maybe a couple of light-duty trailers, this lift is built for you. The two-post design distributes weight evenly, which is a real advantage when you're dealing with heavier chassis that could damage a single-post system. It also means you can work on both sides of the vehicle at once, great for brake jobs or suspension work where you need clear access to both wheels. Another sweet spot is the serious DIY enthusiast who has a dedicated workshop, enough ceiling clearance, and the willingness to invest time in learning the safety protocols. For those folks, the lift's 72-inch height eliminates the need for extra pit blocks or temporary ramps, speeding up the whole repair process. If, however, you're a weekend mechanic who only pops the hood a few times a year, the NT16 is likely overkill. The footprint, 142 inches wide, eats up a lot of garage real estate, leaving less room for parts bins, a workbench, or even a second vehicle. The initial cost is also something to weigh. You're not just buying metal, you're buying a system that demands proper anchoring to the floor, a reliable power source, and, ideally, a safety lock that many cheaper lifts skip. For a casual user, a hydraulic floor jack paired with a sturdy jack stand will handle most tasks without the headache of installing a massive lift. In short, if you're not planning to regularly lift vehicles that approach the 10,000-plus-pound range, you'll probably end up paying for capacity you never tap. Now, let's talk about the practical strengths that become evident once you've got the lift set up. The first thing you notice is the stability. Because the base plate sits directly on the floor and the two posts are anchored to that plate, there's minimal wobble even when you're working on a loaded truck. That steadiness translates into confidence when you're hanging heavy components like a transmission or a differential. Nothing shakes, nothing slides. The 72-inch lift height also means you can stand comfortably while you're under the vehicle, which reduces back strain and lets you see what you're doing without a flashlight. Another subtle win is the time saved. With a single lift you can get the whole vehicle in the air in a matter of minutes, compared to cranking a jack multiple times and dealing with uneven lifts. On the flip side, there are a few hidden trade-offs that can catch new owners off guard. The biggest one is installation. You can't just roll the lift out of the box and start pulling cars up. You need a solid concrete slab, bolts that go deep into the floor, and a level surface. If your garage floor is uneven or has a carpeted overlay, you'll have to invest in concrete work before the lift even sees its first vehicle. The other drawback is the power requirement. The lift runs on a standard 110-volt outlet, but because of the heavy hydraulic pump, you'll notice a noticeable draw on your circuit, something to keep in mind if you share the line with other hydro appliances. Finally, while the capacity is impressive, the lifting mechanism itself has a maximum speed. Raising a fully loaded 15,000-pound truck will take a minute or two, which isn't a problem for most tasks but does feel slow if you're in a rush. All things considered, the Triumph NT16 is a solid piece of equipment for the right audience. It shines when